not a whole lot of people have my cell phone number, and I plan on keeping it that way, and I'll just use it at my convenience when I need to, but and people are like, oh well, then like I just when I meet girls, to be absolutely honest, I just usually tell them that I don't keep minutes on my cell phone. I just use it as a phone book, and I just use the house line because I don't, want to be contacted all the time. And they're like, you don't have texting. No, I don't have texting because it's the most annoying invention since sliced bread. No, sliced bread was not annoying at all. It's actually a great convenience. It's just so commonly used. But in that sense, it really didn't fit. Now, did it? Fail. But no, seriously. I mean, I just think about this. Four presses to reach S versus the device that already existed, which was the cell phone, where you can call somebody up and you can carry out an entire text conversation that takes half an hour in 2.5 minutes. No exaggeration. Sometimes less, depending on what you're saying in the text. So I mean, I completely agree. This is getting absolutely out of hand and has been for quite a while in our society. Moshart admits to being as addicted as the kids. A native New Yorker, she was living in Perth, Australia, near her ex-husband while medicating her homesickness with podcasts from National Public Radio and New York Times Online. Her biggest challenge during the experiment was relinquishing the ostrich-like delusion that burying my head in information and entertainment from home was just as good as actually being there. Moshart began the experiment with a drastic measure. She turned off the electricity completely for a few weeks, candles instead of electric lights, no hot showers, food stored in a cooler of ice. That's actually kind of cool. Wow, she went all out. When blackout boot camp ended, Moshart hoped the electricity is awesome reaction would soften the kids' transition to life without Google and cell phones. That's interesting. It's It's fairly well thought out. It was a strategy that would have made Moshart's muse Henry David Thoreau proud. She is a lifelong devotee of Thoreau's classic book Walden, which chronicled Thoreau's sojourn in solitude and self-sufficiency in a small cabin on a pond in the mid 1800s. Simplify, simplify, Thoreau admonished himself and his readers, a sentiment Moshart echoes throughout his book. As a result of the experiment, Moshart made a major change in her own life. In December, she moved from Australia to Long Island, New York with Susie. Of course, the move merely perpetuated Moshart's need to live in two places at once. She kept her job as a columnist for an Australian newspaper and is living on Skype because her older children stayed down under to attend university. Ironically, the internet eased the transition to America for Susie, who used Facebook to befriend kids in her new high school before arriving. Another change for Moshart. She's no longer reluctant to impose blackouts on Susie's screen time. Instead of angsting, don't you think you're spending too much time on the computer? Don't you think you should be doing something like reading? I now just take the computer away when I think she's had enough, Moshart said in a phone interview. And now that she's been on the other side and remembers what it's like, it's less of an issue. Moshart realizes that living off the grid for 6 months is unrealistic for most people. She also admits getting her kids to go along with it partly by bringing them with a cut of proceeds from the book, which partly by bribing them with a cut of proceeds from the book, which she planned to write all along. But she encourages families to unplug periodically. One way to do it is just to have that one screen-free day a week, not as a punishment, not by saying I've had enough, but by instituting it as a special thing, she said. There isn't a kid on the planet who wouldn't really rather be playing a board game than sitting at a computer. And honestly, for the most part, I agree with that statement. I mean, it's absolutely uh, under promoted the values of having some personal time with members of the family and you know the importance of bonding through communication and social interaction together. Um, Now everybody's just way too isolated independently of everything else, at such, an early age that has become normalcy. And it keeps, it builds cognitive dissonance from, like the real world, I guess, if you want to call it that. But yeah, absolutely. I'm glad to hear that somebody actually went through with that and did such a thing. That's really interesting. I would encourage other people to do similar things and see, how it affects their family life if you have children. And if you want to go ahead and do that, I will definitely write an article about it and update the whole thing, and we'll get that published. Just email me, DerekInTheMidwest@gmail.com. If anybody's got the balls to go ahead and do that, then I'm definitely willing to cover the story. And moving on to the next article here, this out of the Associated Press. Case in Gifford's shooting likely to take years. This is actually just posted about 5 hours ago. Investigators have been poring over surveillance video, interviewing witnesses, and analyzing items seized from Jared Loughner's home as they build a case in the assassination attempt against Representative Gabriel Giffords. It's a case that likely will take years to play out as it goes through the many phases of the criminal justice system. Prosecutions by both federal and state authorities, proceedings over whether to move the case to a different venue, a possible insanity defense by Loughner, and prosecutors likely push for the death penalty. The next step is an arraignment scheduled Monday afternoon in Phoenix for Loughner, who is accused of opening fire on a Giffords political event 2 weeks ago in a rampage that wounded 13 people and killed 6 others, including a federal judge and 9-year-old girl born September 11th, 2001. And investigators have said Loughner was mentally disturbed and acting increasingly erratic in the weeks leading up to the shooting. If he pleads not guilty by reason of insanity and is successful, he could avoid the death penalty and be sent to a mental health facility instead of prison. Paul Charlton, who worked as Arizona's U.S. attorney from 2001 to 2007 and isn't involved in the Loughner case, believes Loughner will likely mount an insanity defense. Given what we know, that's going to be a defense, Charlton said. I don't see a lot of other viable defenses, said Michael Pecoretta, a Tucson lawyer who has practiced criminal defense in federal court for 30 years. It appears, quote, it appears the actual guilt or innocence of the shooting will not be difficult to prove, and his pre-shooting behavior seems to be a history of erratic behavior, issues of pre-existing mental illness, unquote. Before the case even gets to trial, the court would have to decide whether Loughner is mentally competent to stand trial. If he isn't, he would be sent to a federal facility for a minimum of 4 months to see if they can restore his competency. It could be up to a 2-month wait just to get him into one of those facilities. It could take a year, it could take a year and a half, it could take longer. Heather Williams, the first assistant federal public defender in Arizona, said of the time it will take to bring the case to trial. Her office didn't take the Loughner case because it had conflicts of interest. One area that will help the pace of the case is the fact that it's a relatively simple investigation, while other high-profile cases have required a lengthy investigation to chase down leads and co-conspirators. Authorities have said Loughner acted alone. Dozens of people witnessed the shooting, and surveillance cameras captured it on tape. So I would love to know if surveillance cameras captured this incident on tape. Where are the tapes of this incident? Why have they not been made public yet? That's one question I do have to ask. I mean, that's that's pretty absurd. I mean, usually, like again, when incidences of this kind happen, it does not take that long generally for the media to obtain the video footage from whatever camera happened to catch the action. Take Clay Duke for example. The video of that event was up within hours of the incident occurring. So I mean, what's going on here with the lack of information from the media on this particular issue? And this is something I'll continue to address in just a little bit here. One area that will help the pace of the case is... Oh, never mind, sorry. Moving on here to the next paragraph. Investigators say they have also seized writings from Loeffner which used words like "I planned ahead," "my assassination," and "Giffords." Loeffner will face 2 cases. Now, okay, these pieces of evidence. These pieces of evidence seem to be evidence, again, along the lines that they used to fabricate the guilt of the terrorists, of the alleged terrorists, I should say, in the 9/11 attack, such as the passport that survived the fireball when the plane crashed and made its way onto the street and got recovered, allegedly, which obviously is BS. But this is what this evidence sounds like. It sounds like, evidence that is just, it's too perfect. We'll put it that way. They're writings from Loeffner saying, "I planned ahead," "my assassination," and "Giffords." I mean, seriously. Loeffner will face 2 cases, federal and state. The federal charges will cover the killing and attempted killings of U.S. government employees such as the judge and Giffords, while the state case will deal with the other victims, including the 9-year-old girl. Federal prosecutors are going first, as charges have yet to be filed in the state case. Pima County Attorney Barbara Lawal has the discretion to decide whether to seek the death penalty against Loeffner in the state case, while the federal decision on whether to seek the death penalty rests with Arizona U.S. Attorney Dennis Burke and Attorney General Eric Holder, Charlton said. Prosecutors haven't signaled whether they would pursue the death penalty, but experts say all signs point toward that. Federal law gives prosecutors a reasonable amount of time before trial to inform a defendant that they are seeking the death penalty, but there is no hard deadline for doing so. Whether the case plays out in Arizona is up in the air. First, the case was moved to Phoenix from Tucson after all federal judges there recused themselves because their colleague was slain. Next, defense lawyers could ask that the case be moved out of Arizona by arguing that extensive negative publicity would make it impossible for Loeffner to get a fair trial. There was so much speculation that San Diego would ultimately be the home for the trial that federal authorities were prompted to issue a statement last week denying the reports and saying that it was too early in the case to discuss. The judge presiding over the case works out of San Diego, and Loeffner's court-appointed lawyer, Judy Clark, is based there as well. An interesting note about his lawyer, Judy Clark, she also represented, I believe, Unabomber Ted Kaczynski, as well as one of the alleged 9/11 hijackers. So this is another piece of this story that just reeks of BS and cover-up. Picaretta expects the trial to eventually be moved out of Arizona because people's connections to U.S. Judge John Roll and Giffords. Quote, "My personal view is that Arizona is still too close. Why risk a potentially unfair trial when you can move the matter outside of the state," Picaretta said. He later said, quote, "They have moved cases out of state with far less media exposure than this," unquote, noting that in 1981 trial into the killing of Arizona Republic reporter Don Bolus was moved from Phoenix to San Diego. Another dramatic scenario that could arise in the criminal case, Giffords testifying against Loeffner. It's too early to know if that will happen, and Charlton said prosecutors have many other options for witnesses, given that so many people were there when the shooting occurred. I suspect that there is sufficient evidence relating to who did what where. Not every witness would have to be called," Charlton said. Interesting. And there's an article that if you want to check out, it's out of authenticallywired.com, and I don't remember if I actually got, I believe I did get into this on another day, but just in case anybody didn't know, and this is important information, this is a bit of deeper stuff on the Judge John Roll situation. Why was Judge John Roll killed, but they're saying Giffords was the target and she survived? To me, that's real fishy. And I have questions about where John Roll was shot exactly, as in I want to know on the body where was he shot, and I want to know if the places he was shot is consistent with places where trained professionals are trained to shoot people when they take them out with kill shots. That's what I want to know. And this is what the deal is here. Obama recently signed an executive order allowing the feds to confiscate all the 401ks and retirement accounts. Our media forgot to inform us of this fact. A single judge adjudicated that Obama did not have that authority and stopped the confiscation. Federal Judge John Roll, the Judge USDC Court of Arizona presiding Judge Roll, was shot and died on Saturday by a crazed gunman. The historical connotations are similar to Kennedy Oswald in several ways.